Hello and welcome. I'm Carol Carter and I'm founder and CEO of Global Minded. Global Minded is all about creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented populations from all different backgrounds into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. We accomplish this in a number of different ways throughout the year. When we're not virtual, we have an annual conference every June in Denver. We have programs at different college campuses called College Collaboratives. And we also have Inclusive Leader Awards across 15 different industry sectors, recognizing people who are doing the most for access and equity in their place of work. So every month we have some fantastic equity teams, and this is the K-12 equity team that you're joining today. And we are having a very special celebration this month, which is for women. And we have the great honor today of having some outstanding educators, thanks to Dr. Paul Miller, who's brought these people together. And we will be exploring their background. And we'll also be recording this so that you can find it on your YouTube channel and share it liberally with your students and your colleagues who are really interested in themselves being more diverse and inclusive. Every single month, we do 7 of these different equity sessions, and they're led by leaders of color, and there are primarily panelists from different backgrounds, leaders of color. So it's a really great way for many of your students to see role models of who they can become. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Paul Miller, who's principal and CEO of Green Tech High Charter School. He's an author, just a remarkable connector and advocate for education. So Paul, welcome, and welcome to all of your fantastic female panelists that we celebrate today.
Well, welcome to celebrating our educators here, and we have some wonderful women here today. So thank you, ladies, for joining me. We're just gonna have some conversation here, and so we definitely want to also just recognize you and give you a few minutes to introduce yourselves. We'll give you each about 60 seconds or so to tell us who you are, what do you do, and you can even tell us why you're here. So I'm going to start with Dr. Adrian Dixon. If you could answer those questions for me, I'd appreciate it.
So thank you all for the invitation and the opportunity to be a part of this panel and talking about kind of the celebrating women and in particular women in education. So this is a great honor for me. I am a professor of education policy at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign in the College of Education in the Department of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership. My area of specialty is race and education, and I do research primarily on K-12 education and racial equity, and I'm really interested in urban schooling contexts. And I'm excited to be here because I think it's important not only that we recognize women during the international kind of celebration of women, that's when that time is designated, but I think that we are enriched as a field and as a society when we can include the voices of women. There is a saying that when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And I believe that's true. When we create opportunities for young women and girls, and we make sure that we are committed to their success and affirm them, then that is better for our communities and our schools. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm gonna move over to Anna. Anna, can you tell us a little bit who you are and what do you do and why you're here?
Okay, my name is Anna McElrath. I teach at Midwest City High School in Midwest City, Oklahoma. I've been an educator for 40 years, working mostly in the secondary level. I've taught middle school, junior high, high school, and at the college level. Most of the majority of the students that I work with or that I've worked with throughout my career have been from socioeconomic challenged backgrounds. And they're students who need guidance, support, and empowerment to explore their own potential. I try to provide those opportunities for them. through in my classroom using local resources and through travel. I also serve as a mentor, not just to the students, but to some of my colleagues. That many years of experience, we get a chance to learn all kinds of things, and I love to be able to share with them. Thank you for making me a part of this panel.
Thank you. Dr. Chet, you have same questions.
You said me, Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Who are you?
Okay. I'm good. How are you? It broke up for a minute. Good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Chetachi Egwu. I am a media professor, a filmmaker, a media content producer. I am also a journalist, and it is my pleasure to be here. I teach for the University of Maryland Global Campus, completely online. So that's all about me.
Okay, thank you, ladies. So we're going to jump right into this dialogue, and we have one more person who may be joining us in a little while. We're still working on that. So I'm going to start off with a question. Why do you matter? So tell me why do you matter? Whether you want to tell me why do you matter as a leader, why do you matter as a woman, why do you matter as a Black or Hispanic woman? Why do you matter? Anybody?
I'll go first. I matter because I am, if that makes any sense. I matter because I am. The fact that I am on this earth and on this earth to do something specific, I believe that everyone has a mandate, or that everyone has a task that is given, whether you call it the universe, God, whatever, you're here for a reason. So because of that, very simply, that's why I matter, because I'm here to do the work that I was put here to do.
Okay, anybody want to try? Dr. Dixon, what do you think? Why do you matter?
Well, so I concur with Dr. Egwu that if you are living and breathing and you matter, and I live and breathe every day. And so I endeavor to make a difference. And I think that what I try to do in this world is important. And every day that I wake up with an intention to do good and to get into good trouble. And I think that's important. I have always believed in tying myself to a larger collective of work. And so I believe that my individual participation in a broader collective is important, because I have things to contribute. I have energy to contribute, beliefs, passions that matter. And that is affirmed every day when I interact with the folks that I am trying to organize with. So I think that's why I think I matter. Thank you for the question.
Anna?
Well, when I first read the question, I thought to myself, everybody matters. But I matter because I'm a child of God and I'm a human being. And I think that all of us do have a reason for being here. Some of us will learn what that reason is as we go through life. And I believe that I have found why God has put me on this earth, which is to mentor and to help not just my people, but people of color. And so I've always felt like that's why I was here, that's why I matter. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be there to cross these children's paths and to help them to realize what they're capable of and what their potential is.
Okay, thank you. Now, Carol, you're sitting there, and you're usually quiet for these conversations, but I got to know, why do you matter, Carol? This is Women's Month, so we got to get you involved in this dialogue.
Okay, I will gladly chime in. I feel very similarly to what everyone else has said, that there's a real purpose and why I'm here. And I feel that, you know, by the grace of God, certain things were able to happen for me in my life. And I'm 58 years old, and I feel like time is short to make big change. And I feel that I matter because I have a mission to work with incredible leaders like you to make that big change in a way that has never in our history been coordinated at scale to move those big levers of access and equity. So
No,
that's what I would
and
say.
so you all have a very powerful presence and have very eloquent answers. But with that being said, there's oftentimes that I think women don't get valued the way that they need to or deserve to be valued for various historical reasons, and just don't agree with it. But has there been a time that one of you has been made to feel that you didn't matter, and how did you deal with it? Because I think it's important to kind of go back to some of that so people understand what that looks like or what that can look like for you as a woman. And not to say it's monolithic in any way, but just what did that look like for you and how'd you deal with it? Chet, what do you think? Was there a time that you've ever been made to feel like you didn't matter, and how that, and you don't have to just go professional. If you want to talk about personal or whatever you're comfortable with, please be willing to share.
So this was when I was the head of the Black History Month committee at the former university I used to teach at. And there was a panel of white men who decided that they were going to have a Black History Month program, speaking of from a historical standpoint on like Black history and the law. I was in charge. None of them ever told me that they were going to do this. They just went ahead and they said they were going to plan this. And the interesting thing is because it's this intersection of gender and race here. So they just went ahead, they planned it. I only saw it because somebody came to me and said, "Did you see this was happening?" I said, "No," because nobody told me or asked me. So of course I went to them and they felt, well, we're lawyers, we could talk about it but that wasn't the point. The point is there is a protocol and a way you do things. And this woman is in charge of the entire program. So the fact that they thought that they could circumvent me and do what they wanted anyway was very interesting. And again, like I said, it had to do with race, but it also had to do with gender. The fact that often in society, there are many men who are used to doing what they want without answering to anybody else, and nobody says anything. But this somebody said something. So how did I handle it? I went to them and said, first of all, I'm the one in charge and you need to come through me. It is deplorable. And then I also had another faculty member who happened to be a Black male, and he said, "I'm a lawyer and they didn't ask me to be on the panel." So I had to show them the failures of their approach on all sides. So of course, at first they didn't see anything wrong with it, but after a while they did, and they came and apologized. So that's how I handled it. It wasn't any, just to let them know, look, you're not going to do this. And sometimes that's what you have to do. I mean, you can't, it may not be pretty, it may not be nice, but you need to let people know that you matter, like the question that you answered at first. And I'm going to show you that I matter by telling you what you're not going to do to me. I'm not going to allow you to circumvent me. So that's how I handle it.
Why do you guys think that men at times or anyone felt like they can do that to somebody because of their gender? Why do you think that is? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll say, I think because we live in a world that celebrates masculinity, and we tie, as a society, we tie intelligence and power with masculinity, and literally in the body of men, right? And women typically, just in terms of our physique, we aren't seen in that way, but also it's read differently. So for Black women to be assertive and to be outspoken, it's not necessarily positive. We're not rewarded for that. And so I think the ways that we're silenced are different for other women, white women and other women of color. I think for Black women, it's punitive. The silencing is punitive because our voices are seen as, and I've experienced this, it's seen as we're problematic, right? We make people uncomfortable. I've had white male colleagues actually tell me, Adrian, we were having a polite conversation and until you raise that particular issue. And so it's, again, raising issues that need to be raised when we're talking about equity and diversity, or when we're just talking about being in a workplace that often people tend to, they just don't think about it. And so if you're the one that brings up those issues for women of color, and I'll say for, because I've inhabited this body as a Black woman, that it's, you know, you're the person that's making things uncomfortable. We were getting along. This was a professional, courteous conversation. And then you brought up that issue and now everyone is uncomfortable. And so I think the invisibility is on purpose. I don't know for other women, but I certainly have witnessed it and I have experienced it firsthand. And I again, because I think our presence isn't valued and our voices are seen as problematic.
Now, Nadine, welcome. So Nadine is joining us. Thank you for being here. Nadine, you want to tell us quickly who you are and what do you do?
Thank you very much. I apologize for being late. The time differences and everything apparently caught up with me because I was expecting to be on in a little less than an hour. My name is Nadine Groenig, and I am the CEO for the Southwestern Institute for the Education of Native Americans, or SIENA for short. Excuse me, I'm a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe of New Mexico, and I'm the former director of Indian education for the Arizona Department of Education. So that's a little bit about my background, and thank you for having me be here.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us your time. And so we were just asking the question of, and the ladies were sharing why they matter, and then I kind of flipped it and I asked them, was there a time that they were made to feel as if they didn't matter, and how did they deal with it? Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't matter, and
yes.
and how'd you deal with it?
Yes, not that long ago, actually. The reason I left the Arizona Department of Education is because a new administration came in. And after nearly 18 years of being with the department, I was told I was no longer going to be in that position, even though we had just completed our most successful event a week prior. It was a leadership conference, Indian Education Stakeholder Summit is what it's called. And we had 300 participants, and all of the participants were extremely happy to have been there and to engaged in the sessions that we had, and so they were all very helpful, and they were so excited because for the first time they were actually being listened to and provided information, and workshops and speeches that were inspiring and things that they could actually take back with them to the classroom or to the school district they worked in, whatever their capacity was. So to find out a week later that I was no longer valued in that position was pretty shocking. And I was actually demoted, and they said they wanted to keep me on out of respect for all of my time with the department. And because my husband at the time was going through 2 different forms of cancer. And so so you can take care of your husband's needs. So that was a gut punch for sure, because my passion has always been, helping the Native community. And when I became an employee of the Department of Education, within a year, I was also serving on a board of a nonprofit organization. And a few years later, I started my own, which is SIENA. So I founded SIENA in 2007, and I worked it for 8 years before becoming concurrently with my job at ADE. And so obviously I had a lot of time invested. I never got paid to do the second job, but I knew the department wasn't doing what they needed to do for Native people. So I just started to do it myself. And, so having all that time invested would really hurt to be told that I was no longer valued in that position. And I don't want to take up too much time or tell my life story, but.
No, thank you. That's why you're here. You're here to talk about and celebrate. You've had so many wonderful accomplishments, and that leads me to, now you all 4 of you are very accomplished women in your own rights and have done some amazing things in education and leadership in your areas that you are involved in. But how do you guys feel that society portrays women? Like, what role do women have in the narrative, whether it's good or bad? And like moving forward, what would you hope the narrative would look like? Anna, I'm gonna put you on the spot with this one. What do you think? So how do you feel society portrays women, and what's women's role in that?
Well, I would say that we're portrayed as women, as somebody who wears a lot of different hats. And so, but I don't think that we are looked at as equals in job situations, in education, in any of it. I don't know. I guess I just feel like we're not getting a fair shake as to what we really are all about.
Dr. Dixon, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, can you say the
Sure.
question?
The question was, how do you feel about how society portrays women, and what role do women have in the narrative, whether it's good or bad? And moving forward, what would you want that narrative to look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, if we just kept it in the realm of education, women are incredibly influential in good and bad, right? So if we look across kind of in the area that I'm interested in racial equity, on the young women who desegregated schools in both Arkansas and Louisiana. I mean, these are young women, young children, actually, that desegregated schools, and the people who most opposed them, because they had the time to do it, were white women, were white mothers who were outside. And there actually is a book written by a historian, and I'm blanking on the title of the book, about the role that white women played in kind of as obstacles to the civil rights movement, and particularly around school desegregation, because they had time, they were homemakers, and so they could be outside yelling and threatening Black children as they were trying to desegregate schools. So women are incredibly influential. We are the first educators of children, both in the home and in our communities. And historically, we've always played that role. We are bearers of culture, for good and bad. So when we think about kind of how kids are enculturated, how they're socialized, they get that from the women, either in their families or in their communities. And so women are incredibly important as knowledge bearers, as culture bearers, and we as a broader society in the US, and I'll say that this is really, this is very US dominant, that we don't recognize, we don't verbalize the power of women in just in education. Recently, I traveled to New Zealand, and one of the practices that they have in New Zealand, when you go to any of the marae, that you have to wait to be welcomed by the women. The women will call you in and say that you can come and join that particular village. And so you wait. And I have visited a couple of times, once with a conference of mostly Americans who were unfamiliar with the practice and became really were impatient. But the women, the elders, weren't prepared, weren't ready. They weren't prepared. They weren't ready to welcome them in. And as Westerners, we had to just be patient and wait to be welcome. That's an incredible amount of power that people didn't recognize and honor and respect that they had for the women elders. And so I would hope that our narrative, at least when we think about education in the US, is the power that women have, not just mothers, but women in general, have to either educate our children or disrupt the education of our children.
You know, because I think about it, and this can be a very sexist society. It can be a very driven on women's body image, or driven instead of her brain and everything that a woman brings to the table. You know, so I'm going to put myself out there for a second. I wrote an article recently, and I put a controversial title on the article for the purposes of, I really was trying to get people to read it. And I figured if I put a controversial title, they'll read it. But that really wasn't what I was talking about. So the title was something like, we need more Cicely and less Meg. So I was talking about we need more Cicely Tyson and less Meg Thee Stallion. However, I really, if you read the article, at no point in time I reference both women in positive lights, because they're both amazing. But what I did share is the mindset that Cicely took as a older Black woman was different than what she took as a younger Black woman. Initially, she took jobs that were just to get on with her career. And then as she moved on in her career, she decided that she wouldn't take any jobs that put Black women in a negative light. And she wouldn't do roles that put Black women in a negative light. And so kind of the comparison is that Meg Thee Stallion is probably one of the most popular entertainers on the planet, and has so much talent, and has a 4-year degree. And I think she might even be working on her bachelor's degree. So talented, but she also has, at times she exudes images, or she exudes things that may not be what we want our young Black girls seeing with values. That doesn't mean that she's wrong, because there's nothing wrong with a woman exhibiting her sexuality, but some of the values that are behind it. And so when I sent that to women that I knew, they're like, oh, amen, that was a great article. But there happened to catch, I got dragged a little bit on LinkedIn because I became sexist and monolithic, and that wasn't my intent. It was more talking about a mindset of values. Thoughts? I want to hear what you highly respected women think about that in today's society. Dr. Chet, I'm gonna start with you.
Oh, so I mean, it was a great article, by the way.
It's
interesting. It was interesting because it got you to think. There are conflicting images of what is powerful, what a woman should be. And at the close of business, because I hate the saying at the end of the day, at the close of business, I think it is really for each individual woman to decide what she wants her image, legacy, etc. to be. I do understand, especially in the case of, for example, Black women, because we're seen as a monolith, what one does sometimes applies to the group. We're not seen as individuals. We are a thing. We are a mass, not individual people, but we are individual people. And if, for example, Megan Thee Stallion or what's the other one? Cardi B, or any of these women want to exude their sexuality in that way, which is power and agency for them, then go ahead. That's fine. That's you. That's not the way I choose to do that. That may not align with my value system or whatever the case may be, but I think it's okay to go ahead and do that. I think my issue comes in that we're, especially in media, we're often looked at as a mass. We're often looked at in stereotypes. And so when one woman does something, one Black woman does something, it affects all of us. Or let's say women in general, because there are stereotypes in terms of women being, quote, emotional. I don't understand why people don't say that we're all emotional, because anger is an emotion. Some of these other things are emotions, so everybody is emotional. So there are stereotypes that come with that. But the point being that I think what a woman chooses to do to express her own agency, her own strength, her own lack of strength, or whatever is her own choice. And we may not like it, but we have to accept in this society where we are, in the US, this is very US centric, what I'm saying. We're individuals. I'm also Nigerian. Nigeria is a collective country. Nigerian cultures are collective. So you don't just do anything as a woman, because what you do affects the community. So what I'm saying is more so from a Western or a US perspective.
Nadine, what do you think? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yes, and I agree with what's been said so far. I think the difficulty comes into play when you're exactly right, Dr. Egwu, is that how you say that? Say your name? That, yes, I think every group is generalized. Every group is one representative can cause a generalization for everybody in that group by whomever is witnessing their behavior or whatever they're doing. and I kind of came in on the tail end of when I first got on the call of Dr. Dixon talking about invisibility. And that's really, really true among Native Americans. I mean, when I started working with educators who are not Indigenous, and doing professional development with them and trying to help them connect better with their Indigenous students, I couldn't believe the number of women who said, I didn't even know Native people existed anymore. Yeah, I'm gonna let you absorb that for a minute because they didn't have any exposure to us. The only exposure they had was on television and media, movies, and were typically portrayed in regalia because they're historical movies or television shows. So they're 1800s and earlier, so they don't see us as modern day people, living, breathing people who contribute to society as a whole. And so we don't even get to the level of having that representation like a Cardi B or Meg Thee Stallion or the people that you've mentioned. But I'm happy to say that we finally do have somebody who's on a national level. If you may or may not have heard, but Senator Deb Haaland is now Secretary of the Interior, the first woman, first Native American to be in that kind of position. And she happens to be a member of the Laguna Pueblo. So she's a tribal sister of mine. So I just want to shout out to Deb, that's incredible. Thank you. And so that she's a role model. And there are other now representatives at state and federal level who are Indigenous, mostly women. So they set really great examples, and that's what I try to do in the whatever leadership roles that I hold. And so, when we're bringing up people, yes, everybody should have their right to express themselves, however they choose to do that as adults. But I think it's up to us as educators when we're helping to bring up these young people to guide them in a way that's going to be beneficial to them in whatever role they choose in society and however they choose to provide for themselves and their families, so that they don't get to a place where they might not want to be, and where they also have the strength then to not defend themselves, because they shouldn't have to do that, but to feel strong in whatever they've chosen, and so that they can keep their self-worth and their strong sense of identity. And our Native students, just so many of them do not even have that. And when they go on to, if they go on to higher ed, the chances of them completing that are very minimal, very low. So, I guess part of my job is just bring awareness to the non-Native culture society as a whole, that we're still around, and we contribute greatly. I mean, we have people, we have a Native American astronaut, we have Native American doctors, lawyers, like I said, politicians, artists. We're around, people. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. Thank you for.
I wanted to.
Go ahead, Dr. Dixon. What do you think?
I wanted to say, and this is my answers are always going to be very US centric. I think that as a nation, we're afraid of women's sexuality. And for women of color, all women of color. So there was the kind of salsa Latinx woman who was, kind of sexy, and the Asian woman who was a comfort woman who is, docile, and Black women who are sexually available and have a heavy appetite. And I think the discomfort that we have around the sexuality for women of color is because of how we've been cast historically, right? There have been kind of monolithic, to Dr. Egwu's point, there have been monolithic representations of women of color in general. I think the violence that we saw in Atlanta speaks to the way that women in general, but women of color, are blamed for the quote unquote problems that men have wrestling with their own sexuality. The kind of, I call this the white male supremacy of the gentleman who went on he was a mass murderer. in some ways it was a serial killer, because he went and he targeted specific women and blamed them for his own frustrations with his sexuality, and that the police kind of parroted his comment. And so in some ways that we would be like, oh yeah, well, you know, he's just struggling, and so therefore it justifies him murdering women in cold blood, Asian women in cold blood. This is a problem that we have as a society, because we're uncomfortable. And the mayor of Atlanta said that those businesses operate legally and above, so they're not illegal operations. They function as they are licensed to function. So whatever this man's issue was, we have now assigned guilt to these Asian women, but it aligns with kind of longstanding historical stereotypes of women of color as being sexually manipulative, and that we exploit white men in particular, and we use our sexuality to do so. We are a nation that hasn't moved from the Victorian era, where on one hand, we're incredibly embarrassed and uncomfortable with sexuality. And then on the other hand, we punish women for being comfortable with their sexuality and expressing their sexuality. And I don't have a problem actually with the continuum of ways that women present themselves. I think what's hopeful, and I appreciate Nadine's commentary about the invisibility of Native American women just in general, but what I appreciate about this moment is that we can have Cicely Tyson and we can have Megan Thee Stallion, and we don't have these kind of monoliths. What's unfortunate is that we will uphold Cicely as the kind of where we should be, and Megan as, you know, I mean, it's okay while you're young, but you shouldn't, blah, blah, blah. And we can have this diversity of representation. We also have Angela Bassett, right? We also have Michelle Obama. We also have Kamala Harris. We also have Stacey Abrams. So there is a diversity of representation of Black womanhood that may or may not be sexualized, and that's okay, but that we get to be sexualized, right? We are physical, you know, we are people that have feelings, and sexuality is a kind of biological function, if you will, that we get to have. It feels good, people like it. You know, we wouldn't be here if people didn't express their sexuality. And so the taboos around sex are really what women get punished for, and men get to act on it, and their violence gets justified across the board, right? I don't know if anyone has been paying attention, but LSU, Louisiana State University, is in a world of problems now, because they have hidden decades of sexual violence against women by athletes and by coaches, that it was just swept, because what was most important was funding football, and mostly football, keeping these bad actors in place and sweeping their bad behavior under the carpet. And meanwhile, women were suffering, and they were blamed for their suffering. And so again, we live in a nation that punishes women for being sexual beings, for walking around and just looking, right? We can't dress, we have to police our dressing. Everyone polices the way we dress. Everyone polices what kind of makeup if we have makeup on, or if we don't. And yet men can behave without concern for their behaviors if they are positioned in a certain way. And so I think that's really the discomfort that we have with the Megans, the Cardi B's. We're much more comfortable with seeing, you know, older Black women, or even elderly Black women, draped in, you know, with an apron on or a sweater on in the kitchen fixing you a plate, as opposed to kind of asserting their sexuality. So I do think it's an issue that we need to address, and certainly our young people are embracing their sexuality and the fluidity of their sexuality. They are not locked in either they're heterosexual or they're really expressing the fluidity of their of gender and sexual identity. And I think that it's, you know, it's past time for that, and we should support that.
You know, speaking
Dr.
of all that,
Paul, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that because
Go
I'm
ahead.
so glad that that Dr. Dixon, you brought that up. And it's just it's interesting the narrative and the discourse around this, what it would have been if this was a woman who had gone on a killing spree, on a killing tirade. There's also this thing of, even though there's this thing that we're emotional, there's also this image that you're supposed to hold it together. So we can't have bad days. I think, in fact, it was one of the things that was said about him was that he was having a bad day, but we can't have bad days where we can go on tirades and killing sprees. Not that we would want to, but it's just interesting how the narrative around those types of things, where if you're a man, you're allowed to have bad days. You're allowed to do those types of things, even as twisted as that seems, but we have to keep it together at all times. We're not afforded those types of liberties that men are.
No, I think that's important. You know, thinking about that, we have hit a milestone in this country by having a first woman, first Black woman as the Vice President of the United States. So just thinking about that, does it change? What does it change for you? Does it change your trajectory in any way? Does it change your thought process? Does it give you any type of hope? Or is it just something like it's just, you know, it's just a little bit, they're just throwing us a bone here. What is it? What are your thoughts? Anna, what do you think about this? You know, I've come into you and you're like, oh, I wasn't ready for that one, but I got you now.
You keep hitting me on the ones that I was like, okay, I hope he doesn't, because I'm not prepared for that.
No, you're prepared.
Gosh, I really, okay, repeat the question, what exactly you want.
Just at the end of the day, we have our first woman as Vice President. She's a Black woman. You know, how does that change, or does it change your trajectory at all? Does it change your thought process? How does it make you feel seeing someone who is the same gender of you as you, who is a woman of color, who looks close to how you look? How does that make you feel? Does it change your trajectory at all?
I just think that that she's opening the door. She's breaking down barriers for all these young girls that may have thoughts of, you know, their dreams might be big dreams like hers, but maybe they never thought it was possible. But to see somebody that you can relate to, you're looking at them and they're not your typical person. They're not white. They're a person of color, and they've managed to get to where they are. I think that she's an inspiration to a lot of these, well, not just the young girls, to everybody. The fact that we got there, that we actually get to see history is, I don't know. I think that's been the breakthrough. I don't know.
Got you. How do you feel, Nadine? What do you think about this?
Well, I think of my own personal trajectory. This might sound funny when I first say it, but it didn't have an impact on me as far as my personal trajectory goes, because I've always believed that anybody who's qualified, intelligent, go-getter, has the knowledge and wisdom, could be, regardless of their race, could be in a position like that. I shouldn't say always. When I was a little girl, I didn't think that way for myself. When I was a little girl, I couldn't, I was into sports. I was a good athlete. I didn't find out how good until I was an adult. So it never occurred to me that I could be in the Olympics, or I could do, this or that, because nobody ever.
What sport did you do?
Well, I did a lot of sports, but I excelled at table tennis, which most people don't even know is an Olympic sport.
Okay.
So, I was top 30 in the country, state champion many times over in Arizona, state champion in Oregon, won some regionals. And I got a second place in a fairly high level national tournament. I should have gotten first because I beat the guy a few months earlier, but the nerves got to me and I lost in 3. But anyway, but yeah, no, I think it's wonderful that Kamala is vice president. I think from everything I've seen, the responses to that of young girls of color has been inspiring and exciting. And I'm so happy to see that. But like I said, I'm not surprised. I guess the only thing that would surprise me is that in the country, the way we've demonstrated is still divided so much that she and Biden got the votes to get her, her into that position. But as far as, color or gender or any of that, I'm not surprised that there's somebody qualified to be in that position. And, I think too, back about when Barack Obama was elected and he had 2 terms, and I was thinking, well, I was in tears that night, and I get emotional now because I was thinking about, okay, we have a Black president. Maybe someday we could have a Native Indigenous president. And so then I was thinking about the young people watching that and what they might be thinking and how they might be inspired. And then we had, you know who, and all of the troubles came to, the surface that we still have and the things that we're still struggling with as a nation. And in one way that's good, because then we know there's still work to be done and it's not being hidden under the carpet. But another way, of course, it's so sad.
Why do you all think that people want leadership who looks like them? Why is that important?
Because everybody needs a role model. Everybody needs to be able to see in somebody who's achieved something of themselves. We do leadership conferences and leadership trainings for Native youth, 7th through 12th grade. And I, as much as possible, have representatives who are Native doing the workshops, doing panel discussions, doing speeches, doing the entertainment that we have for them. Because, and then I tell the presenters, I said, tell about yourself, talk about where you come from, what village you come from, what tribe you're a member of, talk about what struggles you had to get where you are, what kind of things you had to overcome, who helped you overcome those things, because we're not in isolation. We need help from other people. We can't do things on our own in isolation. And that way the kids say, that person came from the same place I live in now with the same challenges, and he or she has done that and achieved that, so I can too. It makes a huge difference for them.
So I'm going to play the antithesis for a second. So I'm which I'm not, but let's say I was a Donald Trump fan, and I said, Donald Trump looks like me, and he represents my people. Is that problematic for any of you, and why? Like, why is that problematic, or how does that represent? I'm gonna go to Dr. Dixon on this one. This is your area, so I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, until Barack Obama was elected, I mean, all of our presidents looked like Donald Trump, right? So people had their, and as evidenced by the very slow progress that we've made around civil rights. I mean, we're at a point now where we have rolled back the Voting Rights Act. There are several states in the country that are attempting to even go back to Jim Crow. I mean, so not even just roll back Voting Rights Act, they literally want to go back 100 years. We've had that for, and again, until 2008 and until 2020, all of our vice presidents looked like Joe Biden, right? And until yesterday or this week, all of our secretaries of the interior looked like Donald Trump as well, right? So this country has always looked like white men, and they've always been represented, and the churn of progress has been very slow. I think that white men in particular, white women included, have enjoyed nearly 300 years of adequate representation to the detriment of what the country actually looks like. Black people, Native Americans, Asians, Latinx people didn't just crop up like last week. They didn't show up in 2008. We've been here, but we've been rendered invisible. People act as if we weren't here. We literally have been here. But we've had our institutions unwilling to listen to our voices, even when people have agitated. And here we are now, white people are a numeric minority, and they are holding on to power with all they have, something that we never thought we'd have. We've never had the Confederate flag in the nation's capital, and that happened in 2021. And that is a travesty. So on one hand, I do think that representation matters for people who have been underrepresented. I think that's incredibly powerful. When I went to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin after having lived in New Orleans and living in Los Angeles, living in incredibly Black cities. I chose to go to graduate school in Madison, Wisconsin. Why? Because my doctoral advisor was there and she was a Black woman. And when I walked into her office, she was playing Al Green. And I could see, it was familiar. I knew that she would see me because there was an expression of Blackness that was comfortable, that was familiar. And so that matters. And she continued to be a Black woman that was recognizable to me, and that I could see that I could be my full self. You could be fully Black. You could listen to the Tom Joyner Morning Show. You could listen to Al Green. You could be, she was an AKA, I'm a Delta, but you could be fully Black in the ways that mattered to me and be in lily white Madison, Wisconsin. And so I do think that our representation matters. I think that how we represent ourselves. So I would say that Clarence Thomas is not I think it's, it was a huge disrespect to the legacy of now I'm blanking on his name. In the Supreme Court, it was, for him to replace
Thurgood Marshall.
Thurgood Marshall. I just I could see his face. It was a diss to Thurgood Marshall and the legacy of Thurgood Marshall. And when Clarence Thomas was selected, everyone knew this is a slap in the face, not only to civil rights, but to Thurgood Marshall. How do you replace him with someone who denies everything about himself, right? So we have to be careful about representation, about who we're putting in places. Ben Carson, who is he representing? He's not recognizable to me at all. But I do think, though, that we need to, we should have representation there, and we have to be careful about who we put in those places.
Thank you, ladies. So as we're nearing towards getting closer to time, this truly is, you guys have given a lot of great information, got a lot of just intuitive thought, and just a lot of information. But I also want it to be about you. So as a celebration of you, I want to give each of you a minute or two to talk about what your most important accomplishments have been, and what do you want your legacy to be? And I'm going to give each of you about 90 seconds to kind of talk about that. Again, so what are your most important accomplishments, and what do you want your legacy to be? Because I really want to celebrate and honor you for all that you have done, and I need people to know what it is that you have done and what your legacy truly will be. And I'll start with you, Dr. Chet.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Dr. Miller, for having me on. And this was really great. And to Dr. Dixon, I have to say hello, soror. I think today there have been, I don't know if I can point to one most important accomplishment, because I continue to be someone who likes to improve and level up and do better than I've done. In fact, I have a saying, be more, to be better, smarter, wiser than I was yesterday. So I'm constantly striving to be a better person and do more things. But I think if I have to point to one thing, I'm really, really proud of the fact that I have gotten into the live streaming game was in it from early on, and now it's exploded because of the pandemic. So, you know, I'm one of few women and one of few, you know, women of color that are really in the live streaming space. And so in terms of the legacy, that's what I want. I want for young women, especially young women of color, to know that this space is what the future is, that you need to get your claws in this space and hold fast. And it is for you, even though the people that are speaking on these panels at these conferences don't look like you, we're there. And what we want you to do is to kick your way onto these panels so that your voice is heard in this live streaming space. So that's what I want my legacy to be, and one thing that I am proud of. Thank you again.
All right, thank you. Anna, what do you got for us? Talk about your most important accomplishments, and what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, my most important accomplishment was graduating from high school. My parents were migrant workers that came to the States when I was just 4 years old. So when they remained migrant workers their whole lives, and they were able to raise 8 children and get us all through high school. We all got through high school, but I was the oldest daughter, so I had to be the one that set the example for the younger siblings. And I guess it seemed impossible at the time, because when I first came to the States, I didn't speak a word of English. And I can remember being that invisible little girl that couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't communicate with anybody. And it took me a few years, but I got to where I was equal to my peers, and I graduated high school. That made me extremely happy, but then that presented a problem. I wanted to continue, and money, of course, was going to be a big issue. At the time, I didn't realize, though, that I was in a time that was just perfect, because we were poor, so the government was going to help me go to school. I was a woman, and they Title IX, and I was an athlete, and so all of a sudden, all these monies came available, and I was able to go to school. And I went to college. I went ahead and I graduated, and all 8 of my brothers and sisters also attended college, and they did fairly well. I mean, 6 of us got degrees in education. And one of them's a doctor. We've got a doctor in the house. And, so education was my most important accomplishment. And I think it helped them. And then my legacy, I guess it would be to be remembered as a teacher who mentored students and helped them to develop and to discover and to realize their full potential.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. Nadine, your most important accomplishment and your legacy.
Well, I guess I'd have to say, other than surviving almost 33 years of marriage, my next greatest accomplishment is getting my bachelor's degree, because it led to other things. I always wanted to go to college. I went to college, stayed out of high school. Unfortunately, in the summer between my first and second year, I was gang raped, which set me way off of my path that I established for myself. And by the way, when I got let go from my position as Director of Indian Education, I felt the same way that I felt when I'd been raped. And that surprised me. Because again, I felt like I was just this thing that could be dismissed or used in any way somebody wanted to use me and then discard me. But getting my degree, it got me the job at the Department of Education. It got me it got me in. And then I worked my way up to the position I got. And even though I was removed from that position, I had made so many great connections with people, and through the nonprofit, same thing. So I established a really excellent reputation in the indigenous community throughout Arizona and in the country, because I was also a member of the group for all directors of Indian education across the country. So getting that degree, it was what opened doors for me. And so now being the CEO and having been the founder of Sienna, I can do great things. And I think it was kind of a blessing, turns out, to be having been let go from the position, because it opened me up to a lot more possibility, a lot more freedom. Didn't have to do the politics thing so much. And we're really starting to grow and explode now. So my legacy, I would want to be for us, Sienna, for me, to create a solid enough foundation for Sienna to go on long after I'm gone. And the goal, of course, is to bring into the community healthy Indigenous leaders at home, at school, and in the community. And so that, and to turn around the academic achievement and health and well-being of Indigenous people in Arizona and beyond. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for being brave enough to share that information. And we just celebrate you and your continued success. Dr. Dixon, your accomplishment and your legacy.
Yes, and Nadine, thank you so much for sharing such a personal story and triumph. So I married very young and divorced very young and became a mother very young. And I would say what I'm most proud of is that in the midst of all of that, I was able to earn 3 degrees, even despite I was married and divorced and became a mother at a time in the 1990s where the rhetoric was that Black men were endangered, and that the messaging to Black women was that if you had a quote unquote educated Black man, you needed to hold on to him, and you were the one that was lucky. And what I tell my nieces and my young women students is that no one told me that my ex-husband was lucky to have me. And that the messaging for Black women is that you are, and so I appreciated your earlier question, Paul, is about why do you matter, is that I think we need to remind our young women that they matter every day, that people are lucky to have them in their lives. And we don't often tell them that your family is lucky to have you, your friends are lucky to have you, your boyfriend is lucky to have you. And so although I was also in college and just as smart, I was never told that he was lucky, or he wasn't told in my earshot that he was lucky to have me. And so as a consequence, when we divorced, and I had 2 sons, I was told directly that my sons would struggle, that I would not know how to raise Black men, that I wasn't capable of doing that. And essentially that I would have men in and out of their lives. It was the whole, because I wasn't married. And I was like, well, I'm still like what, how do we get to that leap? And they have a good relationship with their dad, but what I'm most proud of is that I earned all 3 of my degrees, and that my sons earned not only their high school diplomas, but they are college graduates, and they are also earned graduate degrees. My youngest son is an artist. He's a painter. He's a college professor. My oldest son is his master's of public health. He works in the Louisiana Department of Health, and actually is managing the COVID vaccination response. So he handles that for his region in the state of Louisiana. I'm incredibly proud of them. And I think that is those 2 accomplishments go together, that it was important for me that my sons could see me pursuing education, because we know when mothers are educated, it radically changes the lives of our children. And that my legacy will be not only my children, but my students, who I have sown into them as if they were my own children. And so I'm proud of that. And I know that they will go out and do important work.
So I just want to thank you, super duper women, and celebrate you, not just during Women's Month, but all the time, for all of your accomplishments, for all that you do and will continue to do. Big props, just thank you again for being here. I'm going to turn over to Carol for the final words. And again, thank you, Carol, for the opportunity for us to get all these wonderful women together.
Thank you all so much. And I just want to share that, for our Asian ally female women, that our hearts go out to you this really difficult week of what just happened in Atlanta. And we all, from all different backgrounds, stand with you. And also our friends who are ability status and any other group of amazing women that aren't part of this collective right now, that we all really have our hearts with you and look forward to changing the world and the kinds of challenges we face with you. And I'll say for you all, this last hour, it's just been such a pleasure. And Anna, I grew up in Tucson and was able to take the train to Guadalajara and do some things where I just so revere, the Hispanic culture. And Nadine, same, with such an integral part of the Native American culture, so rich, from Arizona. And I wanted to share for the African American Black Magic Sisters, this is my, I was given this when I was over with the Maasai tribe. I got to go to Kenya 7 years ago, and I gave the keynote at the Africa International School Association, and then got to go out with the Mara with some of the people there. And it was just like the most amazing experience. And I love Chet Senior. And I was like, okay, Celeste, go get that, because we hang it up on the wall. And I was like, I want to put that on. So I just think, you know what, we all can change the world in such a big way with the way that we love and the way that we can heal our own stuff. And I just think women are so key in that right now, because we are able and willing to work with everybody. And I say, Global Minded, it's a virtual underground railroad getting everybody to financial freedom and fulfillment. But we can all do it through the power of women, and also men like Paul, who have really great, generous qualities that are often associated with women. And we can have qualities sometimes associated with men and be really effective as the leaders we want to be. So thanks to all of you. What an amazing hour to spend with you and get to know you all. And I'm just going to tell you, June 2022, I want you guys to come to Denver. This year, though, we're having a virtual event. It launches at Earth Week, goes through the middle of June, and it's going to be called Reboot Resilience, Rebound Remarkable. And every single session is going to be about how we can come out of this summer far stronger than the people we were before COVID and all of the things we all went through last year. And then there will be a student on every single panel. So strong voice of the emerging generation. And we hope you all will join us for that in some capacity. So thank you all so much for being here. And we'll have this posted, and we'll give everybody the link in the next 12 to 24 hours so you can share.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Carol.
everybody.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being on.
It was awesome, guys. See you soon. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.